All right, good afternoon. Welcome back to the Money Advantage podcast. This is Rachel Marshall and Bruce Wayner, and we are delighted to be with you today and sharing a very special guest, Lucy Taylor. Lucy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, before I give a formal introduction to you and we dive into your work and the amazing things that you've been up to, Lucy, I want to turn it over to Bruce for a second because Bruce, you have met with Lucy and you know a little bit even more about her than I do and the just the value that she's providing in the world. So I would love to hear, Bruce, from your perspective, just the value of this conversation we're
Well,
about to have.
yeah, what actually motivated me to even respond to Lucy's email to me was my former education days, and even going all the way back to when I was a senior in high school and took an economics class in my high school, and it was taught by one of the history teachers who didn't, looking back, he remains a friend to this day to me. And we've known each other for 50 years. He knows nothing about finances. He was just parroting things from a book, and it was simply we were talking about rates of return and how to open a checking account and how to get a mortgage and taking quizzes on this and so on and so forth. And I was thinking about how useless it was. And then as I got in further into education, and then I've actually been to the Missouri Congress on this topic um, through school choice, and that was part of the push of was towards financial education, both in the private sector and in the public schools. And I guess, kept thinking, well, I don't want you people teaching anything about education in this situation. You don't even know about it, how the education of finances works in the real world. And so when Lucy reached out, I thought, well, this is going to be interesting. So we had a nice little talk, and I think what we're what I told her is, are you really trying to do this through a curriculum at the schools? Because I'm totally against this. And and for a variety of reasons. But my saying is, our government cannot even take care of its own finances. How can it teach other people to take care of their finances? But then Lucy explained to me her objective is to teach financial literacy more from I'm going to let her explain it exactly, but more from a gaming and an emotional aspect. And then I thought about the Oregon Trail game that I used to play a long time ago. And I thought there was some consequences there, but if if you died, or if you ran out of money, well then you just waited to play it the next time. And so there wasn't really that big of a consequence in it. But I think she's and her team has figured out some ways to bring that together. So I'm really excited for our listeners because there's nothing more important, I believe, than the emotional part of this. And Lucy brings this emotional part to the table of this. As a financial advisor, I hate it when I hear another financial advisor say, "Well, don't worry about it. The stock market goes up, the stock market goes down. Don't worry about it." And that is I think is some of the worst advice you could tell a person. Um, and then making people like Dave Ramsey does, making people so fearful of debt is something else that doesn't teach them anything except a negative view on money in the first place. And I'm not saying Dave hasn't helped people, get out of debt, but I don't think he's helped people thrive. And we're looking to help people thrive. So that's why I wanted to have Lucy come on today, because she approaches it from an educational viewpoint, just like we try to do for the last 9 years on our podcast.
So, Bruce, I'm really thankful when you meet amazing people and bring them onto the podcast. So, what are we talking about today? We're talking about financial literacy. We're talking about how to help specifically, I think it's Gen Z that you're helping primarily, right? Helping Gen Z understand money and not just from a specific here's how to do one thing. Here's how to pay off debt. Here's how to invest. Here's how to get a better rate of return. But you're looking holistically at finance and you're trying to teach them financial literacy through gaming, which is super cool and very insightful because you're trying to tap into things that they're already interested in and that are addictive rather than just boring book learning that doesn't really apply to them. So, Lucy is a student. I'm going to give just a little bit of background and then I'm going to dive into your work and ask you about this. So you're a student at the University of Austin. You're a founding member of UATX Alpha Fellowship. As part of the inaugural class, Lucy is passionate about innovation, both in education and in entrepreneurship. She's been on the Fox News Will Kane show and other interviews to share how UATX, or University of Austin, Texas, and Aurum, is that how you say it, Lucy?
It
Aurum?
is, yes.
Awesome. Aurum are challenging the status quo of universities and personal finance education. So, through several ventures, Lucy learned financial literacy and cultivated a passion for entrepreneurship, which is just so beautiful. These experiences then revealed this huge flaw across the entire industry of financial literacy. And that personal finance education is neglected, it's uninspiring, and even predatory. Lucy built Aurum. Did I say it right again? Aurum,
Yes,
Aurum.
you did. Spot on.
Okay. To target this. So she's transforming finance into a system to optimize rather than a set of rules to obey. So, Lucy, this is a huge need, financial literacy, especially for the upcoming generation. I know you're going to just have a great conversation today. But first, how did you get into this? What interested you in this problem?
Okay, great question, Rachel. I've always been super interested in both math and entrepreneurship. And those they're two separate niches, I guess, but when you kind of combine them, something really powerful happens. My entrepreneurship journey kind of started even at age 5. I started selling our chicken eggs that we had on our land to my neighbors and just going around and learning about revenue versus profit and the expenses that went along with that. And then I kind of graduated from that and started an Amazon book business at age 10. And then I had a couple e-commerce ventures throughout high school, and then it sort of graduated into what I'm doing now. So I've always loved financial optimization, and specifically, I loved calculus. I loved all kinds of math, and so bringing those two together had some really interesting outcomes for me. And I had a few insights on, wow, personal finance should be taught to everyone and it should be taught through entrepreneurship. And when you apply specifically a financial optimization method to that, kind of like what family offices do, you get some really interesting results.
Well, I think you might have lost a few people when you said you love calculus. That is fascinating. So I'm very glad there's people like you who are fascinated by the finer elements of math and the complexities of that. But I think what that shows though is that you're really thinking through this at a fundamental level. You're not just glossing over details. You're not just saying this is a problem that I am dreaming about a solution. You really are in the tactical, in the weeds of understanding how math works and then trying to figure out how to apply that to this tool of entrepreneurship, which is thrilling and exciting and that can capture anyone who doesn't even care about numbers or math. And you're connecting those together. So how did the idea for gaming as a mechanism or a platform for teaching personal finance, how did that come about?
Yeah. So, I mean, it came from an insight that I had where money is a game. Like when you look at it realistically, it has set rules, it has set strategies, and there are set winning conditions. But there are also, no respawns, there's no restarts. It's a high stakes game that all of us are playing, and we need to teach it that way. So, I mean, Bruce and I have talked about kind of the failures of traditional public schools with teaching financial literacy education and how it's just a lecture format. You're just talking at people and expecting them to respond well to that. But in reality, it's much more, like Bruce said, emotional. It's much more behaviorally informed. And we need to incorporate that into how we teach it. So I think teaching it through a game, teaching it that applied is crucial for having it stick and then also transfer to adulthood.
That's awesome. Do you think, Lucy, that if you could get someone who is not entrepreneurial, interested in entrepreneurship, and had that tactical experience, do you think that in itself would be transformational for them. And I'm just wondering if that is the ideal path, then you're taking that into a world. I don't want to say make believe. I feel like that word might diminish the game nature of it, but you're taking it to a lower stakes environment where it's not real money, but you're doing the same thing. Is that kind of what your philosophy is of taking the entrepreneurship to a game environment?
Absolutely. Yes. People love playing games. I mean, if you look at Minecraft, you look at The Sims, Roblox, all of these kind of resource optimization games, people love playing those. It's just when you apply that to real life, people get like, whoa, this is kind of a lot. And they get overwhelmed very easily and think, oh, I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't know how to do this. But we practice it all the time in games. And so I think games are a really inviting way to get someone interested in this and get them excited about it and then teach them the skills that they need to bring that into real life.
Mm, that's
So
awesome.
Lucy, you didn't even know what I was talking about when I said Oregon Trail, then, did you?
I did not.
I did though, Bruce. I did though.
Yeah.
My uncle worked for Apple Computer. I don't know if that's an Apple product. I'm not even sure I'm connected.
I think it was. Yeah.
I thought it was because he brought it on his laptop, and I just remember being a kid. I was probably about 11 or so, and he brought his computer, which was super cool at the time. I don't think we had a computer yet. He got us our first Apple Mac, I don't know, bubble back colored computer. I can't remember what they were called, but he showed us Oregon Trail, and it was super fun.
So I would have you look that up, Lucy, sometime, and because I think it may help your journey,
Okay.
knowing kind of where the first kind of game that tried to emulate um, somewhat entrepreneurship through exploration of the far west, because you had to make decisions about how much supplies you were going to take, so on and so forth, how much rest you were going to take, so on and so forth. So it, I think would be very helpful. What touched a nerve on this subject too was from the wealth side, more so than the insurance side, because the wealth side has so much compliance that they require me to take continuing education things, and there's no learning involved whatsoever. I mean, it's example, they may say, okay, money, anti-money laundering, and they'll have you click through a PowerPoint presentation, and then at the end you take a test and you have to get 7 out of 10, and if you don't pass, then you just go back to the beginning, click through the PowerPoint, click through the exact same questions again to get 7 out of 10. Um, it's absolutely ridiculous. And then they thought they were going to improve it, so then they made videos so that you couldn't click through, but you could drag the time bar through and finish it. Well, then they got where they improved it even more, and they said, no, you can't drag the time bar. You have to actually watch the entire video. But then you figure out, well, I'll just start the video and then I'll do some other work. And then when I come back, then I'll just take the test. I mean, this brings us to the first thing. Um, you talked about the hook and the problem. You said that the traditional financial literacy teaches compliance and not wealth. Well, in your mind, what's the difference between the compliance and not wealth, Lucy?
Yeah, I would say the biggest difference is between knowing something and actually doing something. So, what you just described, kind of the continued education model, unfortunately, that is the default for so many schools. It's not mastery learning, it's continuing to teach until some metric is met, and then either advancing the student on with learning gaps or kind of failing them, and then they have to start all over again and get back, get caught up again. So, I think definitely on the knowing side, there's so many studies that show this. I mean, there was one that was super influential to me. The study showed that across a long-term financial literacy course, the actual course only explained 0.1% of the variance in financial behaviors. So there is a huge difference between passing the course and filling out the multiple choice test and actually applying those behaviors in your life and succeeding long term. So most education up until very recently has focused on the former, which is knowing, filling out those sheets, attending the lectures, focusing on the pass fail method, Whereas this, with kind of new ed tech, with the opportunities that AI presents, we're able to focus on mastery learning and applying that into real life, making it behaviorally informed.
That's fascinating in and of itself because going back to what Bruce was talking about CE classes, I think if anyone feels that the information that they're learning is factual only, it doesn't relate to their life, it doesn't tell me anything about what my actual questions are and how to navigate my actual life experience, it's irrelevant. And then I'm just memorizing. And if you're memorizing for the sake of passing a test, that's not applicable. So, can you describe? I'm trying to remember the guy who did the work on mastery and talked about the 1,000 hours or 10,000 hours. But talk to me about what you see the describe what mastery is specifically when it comes to finance. And then I have a follow-up question for you, but let's start there first.
For sure. I can take that from the angle of what kind of our AI is going to be measuring in terms of mastery learning versus just going through the motions. So, an example of just understanding something would be knowing compound interest, being able to do a compound interest calculation and recognizing that if I invest a certain amount of money time and time again, that money will grow. On the other hand, you have actually applying that knowledge and saying, okay, in my real life, I know what compound interest is. I know that it's important to save for my retirement. But instead of just, understanding that and keeping that in my mind, I'm actually going out and applying that. I'm contributing to my Roth, I'm contributing to my 401k repeatedly. And so that's kind of the difference between just knowing something and doing it. And then as far as mastery learning, we have a very specific, rigid knowledge graph that the AI has to follow. So for example, you can't get to, let's say, compound, investing principles without knowing what compound interest is. You have to advance and master that skill by the AI driven metrics before you can advance and then go on to learn the more important stuff. So this is really all aimed at combating what's called Swiss cheese learning, which is like, you'll kind of advance, you'll do the continued education, but there will be knowledge gaps. You might not remember how to do this specific task exactly right. And so most schools will just glaze over that. They'll be like, okay, it's fine. Like, you passed the test, you're going on to the next grade. But what we're trying to do is cover all of those knowledge gaps so that they don't manifest later and create bigger issues later on when the stakes are higher.
And that's really important. I mean, I'm thinking about, I guess I didn't have the language for that specifically, but I'm thinking about homeschooling our kids and, the different types of learning mechanisms, or specifically in math. And you have Saxon math, which is what we're using. And it's this spiral method where they're introducing a new topic, but then they're coming back to the foundation again, and they're introducing a new topic and coming back to the foundation, making sure they're connecting it and grounding it with what you already know. But I'm also thinking about how you could never do algebra if you couldn't do multiplication, addition, subtraction, division. I know I said that in a funny order, but if you didn't know the basics, you couldn't do your times tables, you would not be able to do the more advanced math. And so I think what I'm hearing you say is, like any maybe classical type of knowledge base, math is this way. Latin, I have a daughter who's learning Latin as well. So it's very much this way. You have a foundation you have to remember, and then you're adding on top of that, but you have to remember and keep in your working knowledge the things that you've already learned in order to be able to add on the new chunks that keep on developing and building on top of that, like scaffolding. Would you agree that that's the type of learning that you're looking for then financially?
Exactly. Yes. Scaffolding is super important. It's one of the three kind of pillars that we are aiming at accomplishing with Aurum. It's very important to keep your working memory. And, that's the importance of just in time education, not teaching 16-year-olds about retirement. They don't care. Teach them about budgeting, teach them about saving, teach them about the things that are actually applicable to their lives at that time. And then you kind of build on that as it gets more complex and more applied.
So
Okay.
this is a good transition, Rachel, because you're talking about Latin. So Lucy, explain to the audience the origin of Aurum and why you picked it, the word.
Yeah, so aurum is the Latin word for gold, and I picked it just because it's kind of the epitome of wealth. Like, gold is stable, it's been established for since ancient times. It's completely just the epitome of long-term stable financial wealth that, does not fluctuate with market conditions. It doesn't, it's not going off and trying to invest in, things that don't matter. It's stable, it's concrete, and it's real. And so that's kind of the trust-based branding that I'm trying to work on. Is we're not going off and just teaching the Dave Ramsey style where it's like cut up all your credit cards, and we're also not swinging the other way and saying go invest in all of these random crypto schemes. We're trying to teach enduring, lasting wealth, and I picked Aurum for that reason. It's stable and it's enduring.
I love that. And that's a perfect lead into my other question that I wanted to kind of bring around this. How would you define the end goal of this particular financial education? And what I mean by that is, if it was the Dave Ramsey world, the end goal is debt free, right? Zero debt. But then there's always the question, then what? What next? If the end goal is the highest pile of net worth, okay, well that might be I made it to a certain net worth amount, and then what? What does that look like in retirement? What does that look like in terms of income? What would you say the end goal of, like, you've succeeded through all these ranks, you've scaled through Aurum, and you're winning. You have this you've reached the target, you've reached the the end point. What is that?
Yeah, I have two answers for that. One is the kind of more materialistic one, and then one is further than that. So I think a lot of financial education platforms need to teach entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, business building, that's equated with freedom. And that's kind of the final frontier of what Aurum is supposed to be. You're supposed to be thinking like an entrepreneur, acting like an entrepreneur. You're no longer an employee. Even if you are a W-2 worker, I think the entrepreneurial mindset is your biggest defense against AI, against job competition. You need to be able to cultivate those skills and think like an entrepreneur, run your finances like a business. On the kind of the other end of that, going beyond it, I think the end goal is living abundantly. And, that follows very well from entrepreneurialism, because when you're creating freedom and you're creating an abundant life for yourself through financial means, you are able to live more abundantly. You are able to make memories with your family. You're able to leave the country whenever you want and go on a trip with your mom. It's all these things that, money is not the end goal of life. I don't think hoarded cash or even entrepreneurial success is the end goal, or should be the end goal of anyone's life. It goes so much deeper than that. And specifically, I think freedom and living abundantly is one of the biggest things that money can get you.
That's so important, I think, to hear, just because everyone wants money for a reason that does not actually include money. So it's not really, I wanted an extra 100,000, or I wanted an extra $500,000, or an extra $3 million. That's not really the end goal. The end goal is what that can accomplish, what it can do, what that shows up like in your life in terms of where you can live, what choices you can make. Can you be free to travel? Can you be free to have this particular experience, or be around these kind of people in masterminds, or whatever it may be? So you're talking about those decisions and the life that springs from that. And so it sounds like what you're doing is you're helping people to navigate not just one target, but managing all of the peripheral decisions that are needed in order to accomplish that target. You mentioned earlier saving. If they're going to save, that requires making a lot of other preliminary decisions and planning to lead up to the ability to have the money to save. So can you talk about what what that looks like as they're working through the stages from the beginning level of mastery? What are some of those skills that they're first mastering in order to move on to the next ones?
Sure. So within our first stage, that's kind of the game stage. This is targeted at kids because kids love games. So they're kind of working through this, I guess, simulated world. It's hard to describe, but it's earning money, it's investing that money. It's the ultimate goal of the kids, I guess, form of the game is building a business. So it's kind of a tycoon game. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Roblox, but kids love doing this. They'll
Just a
work in the
little.
little pizza factory. Yeah. And then they'll, buy a new pizza making machine and upgrade this and then build out their factory that way. It's a really addictive flow that I think video games have mastered specifically well. And so they kind of start just going through the grind, doing the grunt work, and then they're able to save and buy their business, and then they're able to scale their business. They're able to bring in more customers and do deals with other people. It is a multiplayer game. And so all the kids are able to interact in this kind of virtual economy. And so as they're doing that, they're building up the skills with saving, delayed gratification, systems thinking is a really big one. And so as they do that, they're building their business, and then they already have that kind of entrepreneurial mindset in place for when they become a teenager. And then they start working their first job. And like I said, I don't think being a W-2 employee or any of that is contradictory with being an entrepreneur. I think you can work a job and then manage your money like you're managing a business. And so that's kind of what we want to drive home for them in the teen stage. And then as they're kind of experiencing money for the first time in their real lives, earning for the first time, saving for the first time, they're able to allocate money in the most efficient way possible that brings them the best financial outcome. And so that is really kind of the progression that we're looking at with learning these elementary skills within the game and kind of, I guess, collaborating with or competing with. We're kind of doing both in that virtual economy. And then once they've kind of mastered those skills around, like, I'd say sixth grade, then they're able to transfer those. And then when they get their first job, start really applying them in the real world.
How do you, I mean, we talked a little bit about this in preparation for the podcast, but how do you make this more than just some kind of game for them? Because, when I play a game like this, or when I played a game like this in the past, I get to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to take much more risk than I thought I was going to take because, if I lose, I lose. I'll just start over again. But in real life, you push your chips to the table in the form of capital, and that capital was made from your actual work, and you have a different attitude then about how you value your capital. Now, I don't know if you guys have a part or a vision of the game actually having to contribute capital to it. But then I'd say as a young person, is that really your capital, or is that capital that you just went to mom and dad and say, hey, can I have $10 for this game? And so the consequences aren't as great. So have you done anything to try to overcome that?
Yeah, so two things on that. One thing that we're doing really, focused on is building in real life applications in the game. So let's say you're maybe a sixth grader, you've been playing this game for a while, and you've been doing kind of the in-game quests, like buy this, build this business, and then a real life quest pops up, and you're like, wait, what is this? And so what we're thinking of doing with that is implementing real life things that kind of have to be verified by parents or something like that. It's a safe environment for kids. But let's say a real life quest would be, I don't know, start a lemonade stand. And then it kind of monitors you through that. It's like, buy the supplies, buy the lemonade stand, make your sign. And it's like very scaffolded within the process. So it's very approachable for kids who might not naturally be entrepreneurial, but it is an in-game quest, but also an in real life type of quest. So that kind of raises the stakes in that, oh, shoot, I need to buy all these things and I need to use my real money and learn how to do this on my own without kind of like the in-game tokens or whatever. And so doing kind of that real life and game overlay, I think is going to be a very crucial element of raising the stakes for kids. And then on that, another point that we're looking at is we're building something called a holistic predictive dashboard. So this dashboard, it begins in the game, but what's powerful about it is that it transcends the game. It extends beyond the game once the kids have kind of grown out of the game stage. So what it is it's a financial dashboard that includes all of your metrics, like what your savings is, what your checkings is, any debt, all of your like virtual accounts that you might have. And it's tracking all of those and monitoring them and then using AI to kind of predict into the future what that might look like. And so once they've kind of practiced that in the game and they've seen how this dashboard interacts with their, I guess, game actions, it begins to scale beyond that. As I said, once we move into the teen stage, things begin to get a lot more real. And so the one thing that remains from that is that holistic predictive dashboard. And so as they kind of grow up, Aurum kind of sheds its game skin almost and becomes more of a real life budgeting software and AI assistant for the kids. So as they get out of this, virtual world, I have no real stakes. And then things start to get really real. That AI assistant has been with them this whole time and it's able to help scaffold them through their teenage years.
That's really fascinating because I think it takes maturity to recognize the skills that you're gaining in a game and see how they apply to real life. As you're telling this, this is kind of funny, but when I was in 8th grade, my parents bought the cash flow game, the Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game. Have you played that?
I have not, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
Okay, so it was this board game and kind of Monopoly oriented, but there was the rat race in the middle, and then you can build like get out of the rat race by having passive income exceed your expenses, and then you go onto this like dream track or fast track at the outer side of the board. So I kind of got all into this game later on, and I realized that they had a virtual way to play, so it was computer based, and then we bought it for our daughter when she was really young. We found it at a thrift store for like $5. Normally it was like 200. And so we got it, we started playing it, Lucas and I, and then I was teaching it for a while. And what's really fascinating about that is it does help you begin to think through what choices you would want to make because you could put all of your money into something super speculative and then end up sitting there for the entire game and have no access to that capital ever again, while everyone else is making slow churn type of decisions that seem a lot more boring, and you're wondering what in the world, because they're winning and you're sitting here with nothing. Or you could put your money into something super speculative, get a huge infusion of cash, and then you rocket past everyone else, but that's by chance. And so you learn things like playing that game in terms of making decisions. Do I want more predictability? Do I want more cash flow? How do I actually accomplish the purpose? And the purpose of that game, the end point, if you will, is passive income that exceeds your expenses. So they're not doing a lot more than that. It's just kind of a microcosm of that one particular area of finance, but it's really, really helpful in translating because everything sounds like it's real world. Um, but as I'm hearing you talk about the gaming environment, there's something really beautiful about that. You call it a flight simulator for wealth. So talk a little bit more about um, why is it dangerous to learn finance without a simulator?
Sure. So, I mean, a part of learning is failure. I mean, that's objectively acknowledged among everyone. And so, when you don't learn something, and I guess you could call it learning when you're objectively just lectured at and just, here's how you do it, kids, good luck. That's not real learning. And so, your real learning starts for most people around when they get into college. So a lot of my peers, they're managing money for their first time. At 18, you're able to open a credit card and you start kind of living alone. And so that is a very dangerous possibility for a lot of people. When you have not mastered the ideas of delayed gratification and systems thinking, it's very easy to slip into credit card debt. It happens very quietly, but then it compounds and builds. And all of a sudden, you're like, whoa, I owe thousands and thousands of dollars, and I have no idea where this even came from. And so, I guess the combination of credit card access and student loans for a lot of people is a huge concern. And they don't have their parents kind of monitoring their every move. So once you go off to college, it's like, okay, yeah, like a few drinks here, eating out here, Uber there, and all of a sudden you owe $500 on your credit card, and you're like, oh shoot, I don't have the money to pay for this. And so you pay the minimum amount, you kind of go through, and then the cycle continues. So without a high stakes, objective, realistic simulator, a lot of people are exposed to these things when they are their most vulnerable. And personal finance can be a very predatory industry. And, that's how credit card companies make money, is
Mhm.
targeting people and getting them into this cycle of debt. And so what we're trying to do is raise awareness, but also through deliberate practice, expose people to these ideas in a safe environment where they're able to say, oh, maybe this might not be the best decision. Let me try to do this instead. And so that's kind of where the flight simulator idea comes from. You're looking at all of these variables in a safe environment and you're learning how to navigate them accordingly. And so it's much more, I guess, easy in that you can see everything ahead of you and adapt accordingly, but it's much more applied than how most personal finance is taught.
I think of this from being the parent of millennials. I don't know the specific age range of millennials, but can you just speak to not millennials? Sorry, of Gen Z. That's your target. I'm using the wrong generation language here. So of Gen Z, I have a daughter who is in that generation, and can you just speak to maybe the specific problems that Gen Z is facing in terms of access to capital, cost of living, and some of the trends that, without having a lot of financial literacy, could completely just devastate them?
Absolutely. Yeah. Cost of living is a huge one. And now, as my generation is entering college and kind of starting to enter the workforce, it becomes a very daunting horizon for us. And so I think it's super important that we start to practice this. And with Gen Z specifically, I mean, in this time of AI, all of these fintech companies are pushing out all of these AI products, and there's so much tech, there's so much going on, and it's very easy to get overwhelmed as just an average college student going into this environment. And so, what a lot of teens do is they turn to social media for guidance on how to do their personal finances because it's super accessible. We have short attention spans, so we like the short form content. And what that ends up doing is bringing a lot of people toward unregulated finfluencers, we call them, financial influencers, who peddle these high risk schemes and they kind of make it part of their brand. So, like we were talking about with Dave Ramsey, he's very into zero debt. He's like, cut all your credit cards, do not get into debt whatsoever. And this is kind of his personal brand. He's famous for it.
Hmm.
And same thing with Robert Kiyosaki. He's famous for the entrepreneurial mindset. And so all of these influencers have their own personal agenda. They have their own brand that they have to maintain. And so that leads them to peddle these ideas that are not necessarily mathematically grounded, which I think is huge for personal finance. I see finance as math in its most applied form. It's all numbers, and it's numbers interacting with each other, it's numbers interacting with people. And so when you have influencers doing this kind of emotional trip where it's like, you need to go invest in this or you're not going to be rich like ever one day, that kind of thing, they send these kind of high risk schemes out to kids, and kids, whether it's from fear or excitement, see this and they're like, oh my gosh, I need to go do this, or I need to stop doing this altogether. It's a very predatory and risky environment for kids to experience, especially when they've had no conditioning on that beforehand.
And I can see there's so much value in parents teaching their kids financial success, but that requires the parents have had some financial skill and acumen and good decision making. But it sounds like what you're doing is, I mean, not replacing a parent. I would say that you're not replacing the need for good parenting, but you are filling a gap for that younger generation. I looked up the years, so I guess it's anyone born between 1997 and 2012. Does that sound right?
Yes.
So you're filling the gap for those young people who are coming into independence to be able to have a a tool to holistically look at all of the elements of their financial decision making and realize the long-term repercussions of the choices that they're making, not just the short term, and be able to make good decisions that will ultimately set them up for success, not save everything, spend nothing, which is unsustainable, not spend everything, save nothing, which is also unsustainable. But it sounds like you're giving them kind of back to some of the language you had around the word Aurum, this like stable, long-term, sustainable way of building and creating wealth.
Exactly, for sure. We're not trying to dismiss the parent or cut them out. Parental conversations with kids are absolutely paramount. That's how so many kids learn personal finance, especially when they're young. And so, what we're trying to do is just facilitate better communication between kids and parents. We're trying to use data, use the numbers and the metrics that we are able to get using AI within the game, and make that conversation easier and clearer between parents and kids.
Which I see as supporting the good decision making, supporting saying, hey, don't fall for all these schemes. Don't fall for the flashy stuff. Don't fall for the things that are short term and just have, they went viral on TikTok and that's why you're seeing it. But really for the things that will ultimately help you succeed by making wise choices and having the grounding and the stability of making those wise choices.
Absolutely.
So
So,
Lucy,
Bruce, go ahead.
when you come on podcasts like this, or you go on Will Cain's show, what is your goal other than exposure to a lot of people? What is are there any other goals that you want people to know about?
I think just raising awareness, like a lot of people my age, we're starting to build things and we're starting to see what the possibilities are with AI and with all of these tools at our disposal. And so I think with how stagnant personal finance has historically been, I mean, even now, Bruce and you and I have talked about this with schools starting to take more intentional decisions with educating their students on personal finance. Now, about half of the states in the United States mandate personal finance as a standalone course in public schools. And so things are changing, but we need to be sure that they're changing correctly. I don't think that the public schools are going to be our best way of doing this. I don't think leaving it up to government spending or lawmakers is the right way to go. I think mandating for compliance is not going to teach holistic long term financial success. So I think my main goal would be showing that this is actually possible now in a way that it wasn't before, using AI, using all of the research that we've done as a society. We're able to apply this in a much more behaviorally informed way. And then using AI, we're able to collect all this data and help students kind of achieve their full potential with that.
That's excellent, Lucy. So, if somebody is interested in what you have coming, what's the timeline for this being released and how can they get in touch with you to find out more?
Yeah, so we have a website. It's aurumfinancial.app. That's AURUM financial.app. And that's where I will be posting kind of updates on beta releases, and the waitlist is on there as well. And then I also have an X profile. It's also Aurum Financial. And so you can follow me there to stay up to date on all of that. And as far as releases, we're currently working on a prototype for the kind of holistic game. But kind of before that, we want to launch something that's much more applied and more family oriented, because game development, like, it's insane. It's such a long stretch. And so working with software engineers, working with game developers, it's a very long process to get that launched. And so I'm hoping within the next few months, actually, we'll have kind of a beta product released that's targeted more at a specific niche of families to meet a need for stewardship and close communication with their kids. So that should be launching soon. The holistic game, it's a very complex game and there's lots of AI integrations and it's kind of a 3D world. So there's all of that game building stuff as well. That'll be launched probably in the next year, but the smaller form of it should be launching in the next few months.
So
Excellent.
the last thing I'd like to comment on is there's by some estimates there's $90 trillion going to be passed along between the baby boomer generation to the next generation. And what I've noticed through my estate planning is some of that is actually going through generational skipping. So they're actually skipping an entire generation, or at least for a portion of that, and going to the next generation. And I just saw it last Tuesday when I attended a reading of a will, and six kids under the age of 13 were receiving a split of $2 million of retirement benefits from their grandfather. Now, they are minors, so they can't have unfettered access to this, but they won't be minors for that much longer. So as soon as they turn 18, they have access to this. So that might be part of your development too, is what happens when you get sudden big lumps of money and sums of money if you haven't thought about that before.
I love that you mentioned that, Bruce. That's actually exactly what this smaller product is focused on. It's focused on wealth transfer between parents and kids and kind of equipping kids to be good stewards of wealth that gets passed down to them. That's exactly what I'm working on. It's so funny you bring that up.
That's fascinating because that is a question around this idea. We do a lot with legacy planning and working with families that do have wealth that will be left to their children at some point, and that clear communication that is needed to be able to help that process happen. So, Lucy, this is fascinating, and I'd be interested in talking to you offline further, even about just some of your ideas around that. So, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for noticing a niche that was needed, a problem that needed to be solved, and for taking action to solve it. And I love that it started all the way back with selling eggs to your neighbors. And I love that you just highlighted the humongous value of entrepreneurship and how far that can go really to allowing somebody to take responsibility and stewardship.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel and Bruce. I've It's been great to talk. I'm super excited about this.
Awesome. Awesome, Bruce. Thank you for bringing her on the show and for just facilitating this excellent conversation today. And Lucy, thank you so much. If you're listening, please go check out aurumfinancial.app and get on that wait list and follow her on X as well. And follow Lucy Taylor on X. And if you are listening, please remember success leaves clues. So model the successful few, not the crowd, and build a life and business you love. We'll see you next time.